Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the fantastic casting director, Lucy Bevan, to talk all about casting the series Masters of the Air on Apple TV Plus. And starting off, I mean, you and your team had such a huge task at hand with this, with the number of characters that you were casting, with it being well over 300. And so what does it look like in terms of just taking the scripts and kind of starting to break it down and gradually realizing just how many parts there are to cast?
I think with any project, when you start, the first thing you start with is a script. You start in the case of Masters of the Air. I knew it would be a huge canvas because of Band of Brothers and the Pacific, but I started reading it, and you just start with the main characters, and then you build from there. And I think it was only when I watched Masters for the first time that I realized quite how enormous it was. And obviously, at some point, you realize the number. But it was when I was told there were over 300 characters, I was like, yeah, we did that. But you just do what you just start at the beginning and then you work out. Yeah, start with the central core and then work and then work through the ensemble. For me, it's all about the ensemble. I honestly believe that there's no such thing as a small part. I really believe that whoever's on screen in that moment telling the story is the star of the show because they're telling the story. And so it was, those actors are all as important as each other for me.
I definitely agree with that, and especially for a show like this. And when you're starting to figure out the log lines and the descriptors of the characters, for a show like this, what were some of the details that felt really important to include in those descriptions? Because you can only give the actors so much, you can't give them the whole script at that early stage.
That's right. What you can do is, particularly with some of the kind of main characters that we were casting, is look at the real people and go into the research of the real people and what they achieved and those extraordinary young men, and what they what they achieved at that time, which was so significant. And so we would research the kind of history of each character and their kind of true backstory, which may not necessarily be on screen, but it will certainly it will certainly help us find the right actor and help the actors kind of find the performance.
And for a show like this, there's quite a huge physical requirement for the cast as well, for the majority of them. Was that something that was a deciding factor as you were kind of like looking at different actors, and particularly in reference to some of the previous projects that they've done?
Honestly, when we cast Callum and Austin, and both of them were over 6 foot, I hadn't thought that through enough because actually you needed to be quite small to fit in those airplanes. And so after casting Callum and Austin, which for the design team was quite a challenge because they're both tall men, then I was more conscious of the size. And so I had a diagram of the Spitfire next to my desk pinned on the wall, so I could look at every bit of the aeroplane. And when you're casting each character, you're bearing in mind where they're going to be in the planes. And for example, in the ball turret, which is the little bit under the underbelly of the plane, where these young men would be literally in this kind of freezing state because it was freezing down there, and they had to be really small to fit in the ball turret. So we had to really bear in mind physicality for that. Little Oakley Pendergrast who got blown out of that ball turret, they had to fit in there. That was tough.
I
Wow.
love that. And also I feel like there's a lot of conversation now specifically about actors in period pieces. And so when you're casting for something like this, which is a historical piece, are you kind of also looking at just even visually how an actor will look on screen when it comes to period pieces?
100%. There were some really vivid faces, like the director gave us this brilliant reference of a Norman Rockwell painting, for the part that Kai Alexander plays. And when he said Norman Rockwell, I was like, that's Kai Alexander. He's so fair and vivid looking. And also Fionn O'Shea, who was in Normal People, playing the horrible boyfriend to Daisy Edgar Jones's character. He's got a wonderful, so what I would call a sort of period quality to his face. That was obviously different period, but you're trying to find people who've got those sort of very vivid features that sort of place you in a certain place and time. So not just height. Yeah. And also redheads. Like, we had to make people as vivid as possible because of the fact that you're in a plane and you're covered with a mask here. And so voice quality to be really different in terms of the other people in the plane was important as well.
You bring up voice quality, and that must have also been quite an interesting factor when it came to casting the role that Anthony Boyle's in, because that character is also narrating the audience through the series and kind of really giving us the perspective of the story. And so was that an important facet when you were casting that?
He's a beautiful voice. He has got such a wonderful voice. He's got this kind of deep sort of timbre to quality to his voice, and we'd seen him on stage. I'd seen him on stage doing Harry Potter, and yeah, he's a theatre actor. He's got that kind of the incredible quality, resonant voice, which I think serves so well for the narration. So yeah, that was absolutely something that we took into consideration. Physicality as different as possible. I know that, you know, Callum and Austin are both, you know, really beautiful looking young men, but we wanted to make sure that there was as vivid and different looks as possible everywhere across the board.
And you were talking before about how obviously anytime any actor is on the center of the screen, that they're the star of that particular moment in that scene. But also when you were casting Nate Mann, that's actually very true for his character. His character suddenly is leading the story at a certain point. And so how did that influence casting that character?
He'd been in Licorice Pizza. He played a role in that, and he did a beautiful audition, and we also really wanted to cast an actor of Jewish heritage for that part. It was really important for that role, given what he discovers at the end of the series. And we wanted to make that as authentic as possible. That felt very important. I think he's a terrific actor. Yeah, he's really good. He did a great audition.
And didn't Gary Gatesman, who's a producer on the series and Tom Hanks's producing partner, also even just call Paul Thomas Anderson? And with that, I was interested in kind of how often there's phone calls or conversations with people who've worked with someone before, because it's not just about the performance, it's about the environment on set.
It is, and it's about whether, and Gary did the same when we realized that Austin was a, you know, front runner for that part. He was working with, you know, Gary's, you know, with Tom Hanks on Elvis, and he put that call in too. When you know, when it's a project like this, and you've got, you know, Gary Gertzman and, you know, Leslie Feldman, she was an incredible, and Tamara here at Apple, Tamara Hunter, you know actors, their reputations, and yeah, you put the call in, you say, how are they to work with? You want to make sure that you've got, like a fruit bowl, you've got no bad apples. You want to make sure that you've got really great people to work with, and in an ensemble like this, that's really important. No
It
bad
is.
apples.
And you were mentioning just now with Austin Butler that he was filming Elvis at the time,
Yeah.
but you'd seen him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. What was it that you were really drawn to specifically when you saw him on screen that kind of came to mind when you were casting Masters of the Air?
There was a physicality to him. He was really good horse rider in that film, and there was a physicality and a kind of vividness, and it wasn't a huge part, but to me, he really struck a chord. He was evidently a really capable, vivid, striking young actor. I always kind of liken it to that, you know, when you saw Brad Pitt and Thelma and Louise all those years ago, and someone really sticks out. Yeah, Austin to me felt like he had that a real charisma and a presence on screen, and an evident skill, not just physically in every way.
And with Austin and Callum Turner, originally they were actually auditioning for each other's roles. What was kind of the turning point where you realized actually they'd be a great fit for each other's characters?
It's a kind of quiet, brooding intensity to Cleven that just felt really right for Austin, even though, you know, we know they were switched, and Callum has just got this kind of twinkly charisma, and even though their ages were different, they just felt yeah, it just felt right to switch them. And it's a decision we all made collectively, you know, with the filmmakers, Gary Gertzman, and it was the right decision, I think.
I love that. And as you kind of went through the casting process, because there's kind of these different groups and clusters of characters, and they're all in separate planes, you and your team created all these diagrams where you would have, okay, this plane over here, and kind of be moving headshots into different places. How did you kind of come up
It was
with and
really
create that?
physical. It was like, yeah, it was a really kind of the most physical job, where you're basically just sort of trying to put together groups that are going to work with each other, not just physically but energetically. We would audition them in groups, sometimes on Zoom, to make sure that they got the right chemistry, but also just as physically different as possible, to have as much banter and kind of you know, and so yeah, you know, I came to my sort of first meeting in a pair of heels, and it was like, you know, just going through all the actors auditions and looking at everything, and then it was like scrap that. We were kind of climbing on the tables, getting blue tack and like sticking all the headshots on the wall and seeing how everyone kind of fits together. But I think it was, yeah, it's a really eclectic group of actors, from lots of people from drama school, people that we me and my team, Olivia Grant, who I work with, we watch a lot of television, we watch a lot of film, we go to the theatre, we go to, we saw people out of drama school. So it was a combination of people who had experience and who didn't as well. And that's the best thing as a casting director, to kind of, not discover, but to cast people at the beginning of their career. Ralph Law did a great audition. I really was really thrilled with him as Lemons on the Ground, because he's got a real kind of low center of gravity. I think, like his dad, he feels very kind of grounded. I knew he was going to be climbing all over that plane. I think he did a great job, and he did a great job with the kids, I think. We cast a little kid, Toby Eden, who's got one arm. It was really important to me to have representation of visible disability somewhere in the show. And I thought Raf had this kind of, he's got this real ease and kind of confidence and self-assurance and low center of gravity, climbing all over the plane. He did a good job, I think.
But I love that you're bringing up how great it is when you get to cast actors and it's kind of like they're right on the cusp of something really exciting in their careers, because it feels like when you step back and you look at this cast as a whole, they're all kind of on that bubbling point where their careers are really rising up to that next level in different ways. Was it kind of later after filming and watching the show that you kind of started to realize those trajectories, or did you realize quite early on in working with a lot of them?
I don't know if I can speak for all casting directors, but certainly for me, the most exciting thing is casting people, casting young actors and and recognizing that recognizing something in them, recognizing a talent, recognizing something that's really to tell a story. And the fact that all of them are doing so well now is not a surprise to me. They're all a talented young bunch. I love Bailey Brooke is a wonderful actor. He came in to read for a small part, and he ended up playing the character Bailey, who in episode 3 kind of falls out of the plane and goes through with Kai Alexander, the Norman Rockwell reference. And Bailey came in for a really small part, and he got upgraded to this much bigger part. And another casting director reached out to me the other day and said, "Who's this actor? He's so great in Masters." And we share that. And I think it's exciting. It's exciting to cast young actors at the beginning of their careers. And yeah, that was really fun. And Brandon Cook is one of the Tuskegee. He was at drama school in London, even though he's American. And yeah, it was really exciting to cast him, and Dawson Cole out of America as well. And she did that one, yeah.
It's such a great point that you bring up as well, in terms of, someone else calling you and saying, "Oh, like this person's really great. Like we saw them in a cast," because it feels like there's always conversations like that happening. Were there any for you on this project where you were reaching out to casting directors and kind of
I'm trying to think. It was Lauren Evans who cast Sex Education, who I'm a huge fan of her work and the work in Sex Education, which is why Jojo Makari from Sex Ed, Shooting Atwood, they're all in Masters. But yeah, Lauren texted a picture of Bailey Brooke to Emily Brockman, who works with me, and said she was watching it and she was like, "Who's this guy? He's brilliant." Like, we don't even get to the credits. We're trying to share good ideas. I think Fionn O'Shea, because I thought he was so good in Normal People. He would be the one, and Louise Keeley cast Normal People. She did a fantastic job in that. And yeah, I watched that. I thought he was standout in that. He was so horrid, and he's such a lovely guy, and he was so good in it. But yeah, absolutely. I admire the work of other casting directors and cherry pick like anything.
I love that, and also going back to what you were describing before in terms of just how physical the casting process was. I love that detail because it's not something you often think of when it comes to casting. And I was curious if that was something that was very specific to this one, just in terms of moving all the headshots around the room and kind of creating these different diagrams.
Or if that's climbing on the wall and sticking them all in groups and then going, no, he'd be much better over here. It's not usually as physical as this one was. This was particularly physical. I was a bit jealous of the boot camp. They all went to boot camp and I really wanted to be in boot camp. They all had matching tracksuits, 38 actors we got to boot camp. So, and they all went in and they all did press ups together and they all did all this physical activity. I kind of wished I had a tracksuit and was involved. Yeah. I'd like to have out press up them. Not that I'd have been able to, but yeah.
And you were mentioning earlier the Zoom groupings that you would do with the different planes as well, but also this project was during the very early stages of Zoom auditioning even becoming a thing. Was that kind of one of the most challenging aspects of casting this project and having to kind of be in that space of adjusting and completely recalibrating your process?
I mean, there's some advantage to Zoom in that you can cast people internationally because they're not in the same territory, but I would always rather be in the room.
When people come into the room, what's the type of space that you try to create? Because obviously people are coming in with different level of nerves, different ideas of what the experience might be like when they set foot, and everybody has such different ideas of characters as well. So how do you try to set them up for the best space of success?
Try and create as calm an atmosphere as possible, and with the understanding that you want them to succeed. You know, you want to cast the part, you want actors to come in and smash it, you want people to surprise you, you want people to get the job. But the most important thing for me is to set up in a calm environment so an actor can come in and at least leave the room feeling like they did their best. That's the most important thing, because the numbers are that it's unlikely you're going to get the gig, but at least if you've been able to do your best, that's the most important thing. And also I think, you know, we as casting directors have got other things going on. You know, there are projects you don't even know you're doing yet that someone can come in for, and they might not be right for this thing in front of you, but they'll be right for something else. Emily, who I work with, Emily Brockman, was casting a show recently called Senna, and an actor came in for that. And then she thought, oh, they could be right for the Formula One film that we're casting. And then that actor didn't get a job in Senna, but he got a job in the Formula One film. He's now in the Formula One film. He didn't even come in for it. He came in for a different job. That's very fun. So I think as an actor, you know, always come in because you don't know what's going to happen. And it's like, you know, lovely Bailey Brooke and Masters of the Air. You come in for a small part and then you end up with a bigger part. That happens, I think, on everything I've ever cast. Someone has come in for a smaller part and been so good that they've been upgraded into a bigger part. That happens a lot.
And also similarly, I feel like so often as well, it's the, you know, oh, someone came top of mind for this. Is it generally something where it's just if someone comes top of mind that you've seen for a project previously, or are you ever kind of looking back at previous tapes or previous notes of yours?
Always looking back at always looking back at previous auditions, and yeah, absolutely. You're sort of cherry picking from every area. One thing happened on Masters when I was reading the scripts, and we got to the character of Pauline, the Polish actress, the Polish character who you know who has an affair with Callum. And Cold War had, you know, Cold War was the most incredible film, and Joanna Kulig was extraordinary in it. And when I was reading the script, I was like, a Polish actress in their 30s, a strong woman who's gorgeous, who has an affair with the character that's going to be Callum's character. And I immediately thought of Joanna, and that's really rare that the first person you think of when you're reading the script ends up playing the part, because usually there are so many reasons for why it doesn't work out. So that was I mean, there were so few female characters in Masters of the Air, and we want to make them as vivid as possible. So I was so thrilled that Joanna Kulig ended up with that part. And then wonderful Belle Powley, who's incredible, who I've known since she was a kid doing it in London. And she's obviously gone on to do Morning Show and that movie with Pete Davidson. She's incredible. And I was so thrilled that she played that part. She's so bright and smart and vivid looking.
I mean, similarly on the other side, because you worked on this project a while ago at this point, have you had other projects come up where someone that you met for Masters of the Air has kind of come into mind or ended up working on something?
100%. I just cast Ed Ashley, who's one of the great redheads at Masters of the Air, in the thing I'm doing now. Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time because they've come in and they've made an impression. You know, you get to know actors when they audition and you know what they can do. And
100%, because it's so much about the relationship that they're building with you and your team, and kind of likewise you with them throughout their careers as well.
yeah.
Kind of how do you feel like, what are some of the most valuable ways in which people can try to do that, because they have such a finite amount of time in the room with you?
I think it's sort of being prepared is really key. You know, the Second World War, the things that these Emin achieved were extraordinary. And for the actors that did the research on their characters and what was happening at that time historically, as you say, they might only have so much of the script. The actors who kind of come in with that knowledge behind them to help you give the detail for characterization and to help you in the best way with your audition, because you've done the research, like that always shows. You can always tell. It doesn't necessarily be, well, it's not necessarily what an actor says about what they've prepared, but you can tell they've got that kind of detail to draw on. And if an actor's done that work, they're going to be that they're good.
And similarly, outside of the read that they're doing, are there kind of touch points in, the way that they walk into the room, the conversation that they're having with you before they start, that are kind of things that you either are like drawn to or that could kind of close you off a little bit?
I'm not great on traffic. I find that a bit dull. If someone starts telling me about what a difficult time they've had to get to me, I'm always like, no, I think it's just being present, isn't it? It's just being, we want the actor to feel as comfortable as possible. I'm interested in them, and it's all about the script, it's all about the story, it's all about the thing that you're trying to, we're casting a project because we think it's wonderful and exciting and great, and we want to bring it to screen in the best possible way. And so it's about the work. Yeah, it's not about the traffic.
And when they're doing the read and they have someone on your end who's kind of like reading back to them, how are you paying attention to them when they're responding and when they're listening?
I'm usually reading in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually read in with actors. I find that's the best way.
I love that. Has that also helped you, particularly, kind of going back to the conversation about Zoom and casting through digital spaces? Has that kind of
I still
helped?
do it. I still do it. Yeah, I find it's the easiest. I generally read in, or Olivia or Emily, who I work with, they might sometimes read in, and I'll do the camera. But generally, I like to read with the actors myself. Yeah.
I love that. It's so interesting as well, because when you look at the scope of casting, it's very much kind of been a lot of the same process, but also there have been all these monumental changes, like the fact that everybody's adjusted to digital things with Zoom. But if you look back, there's even a time where self-taping wasn't something. And I was just
Well,
kind of curious, like what some of the biggest changes and shifts that you've seen or experienced in
well,
your time
there
in the.
wasn't any internet when I started out, so that was different. There wasn't. I remember we used to kind of like put in we'd tape actors and then we put them on a VHS and then you'd plug it in, and it's very, very different to how it was. And how it was when I started with Mary Selway, I was Mary Selway's assistant, and Mary cast with Nell and I, and Out of Africa and Star Wars and Love Actually towards the end of her career. And when I was doing it with Mary, it would just be, she would decide who would come in and meet the director in the room. And I suppose now the advantage of all the different avenues for tech mean that more people can submit. And so that's good. But yeah, nothing beats being in the room, I think.
And also, in addition to working with Mary, you also worked with a number of other casting directors when you
Yeah.
were starting out. What were some of the things that were really key to you and just kind of watching the way that they worked and absorbing their processes?
Mary would, when I thought it was so stressful, Mary would always laugh, and she really loved actors, which I do too. And Mary just loved actors, and she always wanted it to be fun. And that's what I learned. That was my big takeaway. Like, it has to be fun because it's really hard, and if it's not fun, then there's no point. But she loved actors. She really did. And she made 60 look so glamorous. And I just look forward to getting there.
It's also something where, as much as you're creating space for the actors, you're also kind of really fostering the filmmaker, the showrunner, the directors, the creative team, and
Yeah.
even your own team. What are some of the ways in which you try to really kind of guide them, especially if you're working with filmmakers who are a little bit newer and it's maybe one of the first times that they've gone through this?
I know I'm getting that now because I'm getting older, and so I'm working with directors who are younger than me. I'm working with a brilliantly talented director at the moment, John Patton Ford, who made Emily the Criminal, which is an incredible film. And I'm working on his film now, and I realize that he's younger than me. That's that's a new thing, but he's so talented. I think every director you work with is different, and it's the great interest of what we do, and it's all the conversations that aren't to do with casting that help you. It's just getting to know the director and what their taste is and what they need, and they might not be able to articulate it, or they might be able to articulate it, but it's just getting to know that person and the story they want to tell and how they want to tell it, and then you can figure out who's the best actor to realize that. But it's not always directly how they can describe the part. It's the conversations you have around it. It's the time you spend with directors around the casting of the film. You could be talking about anything else that makes you realize kind of what they need.
Is that idea of conversations outside of even just talking about casting specifically, where having weekly champagne Fridays in your office with whoever you're casting with came from?
We always have Champagne Friday. I mean, sometimes it has to be Prosecco, if that's all there is, but usually it's champagne. And we had Sean Levy in the office recently. We were doing Deadpool, and it was Friday, and it's like, get involved. Yeah. Yeah, no, Champagne Friday is important because it's a slog and everyone's exhausted and it's time to get the champagne out on a Friday. Yes.
I love little moments like that. And, you know, going back to when you were starting out as well, even before you started working in the industry, when you're at university, you started kind of a small theatre company there and were very involved in it. And it sounds like you did one or two performances and realized you preferred to be behind.
One. Only one. I was terrible.
But were there things that just from having done it that one time that you feel like really helped you to kind of understand that experience and what
I was terrified. The respect I have for actors. I mean, I did one play at university. I was so bad. It was Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, and I was Gertrude. Raza Jaffrey was in it. Justin Edwards was in it. There were loads of actors who were in it who are all doing brilliantly now. And Zoe Conway, who's a reporter for BBC News, she was in it. She was Ophelia. I was terrible. I was so scared. But yeah, it gave me tremendous respect for actors. Yeah, I was really, really terrible. I couldn't be an actor. I just have huge respect for actors.
And even obviously now, I mean, you have such an incredibly accomplished career in casting, but are there things that you did outside of the industry early on as well that you feel kind of have really fed into this journey for you?
Well, I really wanted to work in film. I knew that, and I started as a runner, which I think a lot of people in British, certainly in the UK, starting as a runner is a usual place to start. And I was running around Soho, delivering packages and buying lunch, and I was just really thrilled to be part of it. And it was by listening to what was going around me. Whoever I was delivering lunch to was doing really interesting and exciting things, and you just listened and learned and just got experience from people who were. I worked for Sarah Radcliffe. She was the first producer I worked for. She was amazing. And I just, you just listened and learnt with a sort of tremendous enthusiasm for being there. But it was being in the environment and absorbing, and I still feel I'm doing that now. I don't think we're ever going to stop learning from the people around us. And now I get the advantage of being surrounded by younger people who've got way, I can learn way more from.
I really love that. Well, you've done such a phenomenal job in casting this series, along with all the other projects that you do. So it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Lucy.
It's so nice to talk to you. Thank you.